It's been a while since I've made a video, so forgive me if I'm a little rusty. Since we're all here in enforced quarantine, I thought I'd give you a little entertainment on YouTube. And yeah, I've hesitated to do transvestigations anymore because they're all trannies, with maybe a few naturals thrown in for confusion. But let's just have a quick look at some of the trannies pushing this agenda. Of course, we start out with the beloved Tom Hanks and his wife, Rita Wilson, whom I've never heard of before. Um, yeah, obviously a tranny with the huge hands, nice tracheal shave, nice necklace. Here she is as a young boy. I guess her greatest claim to fame is playing a character named Pat Conway on The Brady Bunch in an episode called Greg's Triangle. Apparently this is where Tom Hanks first fell in love with her at first sight. The next tranny who contracted the coronavirus is Sir Idris Elba and his lovely tranny wife. I don't know her name, but you can tell he's got a very small head, small ears, no brow bone. He's just another roided out FTM actor. Here he looks like he's on his period. Kind of reminds me of Don Lemon. He played Nelson Mandela. Here he is with his tranny wife, whose arms are larger than his. He's got the classic T-Rex tranny arms, and look at that huge hand. Moving on, what is this woman's name? Rachel Lynn Matthews. Who's ever heard of her? She is an American actress best known for starring in her uncle's movies, who is Christopher Landon, Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day 2. And yeah, this is actually encoding 42, U being the number 21 in gematria. 2 times 21 is 42. Death is 4, 42. Just another tranny actress. She was the voice of Honey Marin in Frozen 2 and wrote on her Instagram story, "Hey guys, I tested positive for COVID-19 and have been in quarantine for the last week." Matthews, who said the test was insanely hard to come by. Blah, blah, blah. Male jaw. Here's her uncle, Christopher Landon, who is the son of Michael Landon. Just another tranny dynasty. Here are the real males in the family. Next actor to come down was Daniel Dae Kim, Korean-American actor and voice actor and producer, known for his roles as Jin Soo Kwon in Lost. And he was also in Hawaii Five-0, blah, blah, blah. Just another FTM actor in Hollywood. Look at the very short, humorous bone. You can just tell it's a woman. Most of my viewers are already well acquainted with these trannies. The Norwegian actor Kristoff Hivju from Game of Thrones has contracted the virus. And of course he's got the classic T-Rex arms as well. Just the very strange look, the close together eyes. They're creatures. Here is Olga Konstantinova Koryalenko, whatever her name is, the Ukrainian-born French actress, another Bond girl, next to the FTM actor Daniel Craig. course, Heidi Klum and her FTM musician boyfriend, Tom Cowlitz, contracted the disease. She's got huge arms and a huge hand. The Colum Hudson-Odoi, the soccer player for Chelsea Football Club, is another athletic tranny. The sloping arms, the tiny ears. They're just weird looking. They're off. They're against nature. And getting into politics, we have the EU chief Brexit negotiator Michael Barnier tests positive for the coronavirus. Just another tranny granny. Here's Barnier pointing to an interesting corona. It is the EU flag, of course. It consists of a circle of 12 five-pointed stars on a blue field, so there's a total of 72 points altogether. It's the symbol for the whole of Europe. The blazon given by the EU in 1996 describes the design as on an azure field, a circle of 12 golden mullets, their points not touching. The term azure derives from the name of the deep blue stone now called the lapis lazuli, or lapis for short. Lapis is also short for the lapis philosophorum, or the philosopher's stone. This is a symbol of the philosopher's stone. It's actually the squaring of the circle. According to the alchemists, the philosopher's stone is a substance capable of turning any metal into gold, also called the elixir of the alchemists. It carries the promise of immortality. The natural ultramarine pigment made from ground lapis lazuli. During the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, it was the most expensive pigment available, gold being second, and was reserved for depicting the robes of the Virgin Mary. Azure is also said to represent Jupiter. This is the alchemical symbol for lapis lazuli, and this is the symbol for Jupiter. They're just reversed. So the alchemical symbol, I already read that. Okay, this is the EU flag again. The stars arrangement in a circle represent the constellation Corona Borealis. That's the corona, and can be seen as a crown and the stability of government. The blue background represents the sky and symbolizes truth and the intellect. It is also the color traditionally used to represent the Virgin Mary. In many paintings of the Virgin Mary as Stella Maris, she is crowned with a circle of 12 stars. This is the English mullet. Here's Madonna in glory, surrounded by the circle of 12 stars. A circle of stars often represents unity, solidarity, and harmony in flags, seals, and signs, and is also seen in iconographic motifs related to the woman of the apocalypse. Let's see. The New Testament book of Revelation 12:1, 2, and 5 describes the woman of the apocalypse. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. Here's a portrayal of The Woman of the Apocalypse by Albrecht Dürer. This is William Bouguereau, The Virgin with Angels. In Catholic tradition, she has been identified with the Blessed Virgin Mary, especially in connection with the Immaculate Conception. Mary is often pictured with a crown or circle of stars. Here's Diego Velázquez' Immaculate Conception of 1618. Here's Giovanni Battista Tiepolo's Immaculate Conception. The doctrine of the Immaculate Conception, Mary being conceived free from original sin, is not to be confused with the virginal conception of her son Jesus. Catholics believe that Mary was conceived of both parents, traditionally known by the names of Saint Joachim and Saint Anne. The Church celebrates the Feast of the Immaculate Conception on December 8th, exactly 9 months before celebrating the Nativity of Mary on 8th of September. The Feast of the Annunciation, which commemorates the virginal conception and incarnation of Jesus, is celebrated on March 25th, which is 9 months prior to Christmas Day, a period of 270 days, which is also how long a baby is held in the womb. Here is the actual conception of Mary. It's the embrace of her parents before the Golden Gate in Jerusalem, Saint Joachim and Saint Anne. This is on December 8th. And here is her birth, 270 days later on September 8th. I'm sorry, the previous one was December 8th. In writing, Anne's name and that of her husband Joachim come only from the New Testament Apocrypha, the Gospel of St. James, which was said to have been written at the year 150. Here's The Meeting at the Golden Gate by Giotto in the 14th century. During the medieval period, the conception of Mary was symbolically depicted in the meeting at the Golden Gate and was an early scene in many cycles of the life of the Virgin. The kiss was the literal representation of the moment of Mary's conception, the actual moment of the Immaculate Conception. Mary was conceived of Anne without original sin. This belief in the Immaculate Conception states that God preserved Mary's body and soul intact and sinless from her first moment of existence through the merits of Jesus. Here's Saint Anne with Mary. Saint Anne's parents were named Stolanus and Emerantia. Here's Emerantia. This is Emerantia in Prayer by Adrian van Overbeek from the Dutch Renaissance. Here is the Birth of Saint Anne by the same author or artist. Here's John Everett Malay's work, Christ in the House of His Parents. Anne is shown in her son-in-law's house, Joseph's carpentry shop, caring for the young Jesus who had cut his hand on a nail. She joins her daughter Mary, Joseph, and a young boy who will later become known as John the Baptist in caring for the injured hand of Jesus. This is Saint Joachim, or Joachim, sometimes it's pronounced. The age of Saint Anne when she married Saint Joachim was 24, and that of Saint Joachim was 46. 20 years they lived in married life without issue, and thus Saint Anne at the same time of the conception of her daughter, was 44 years old, and Saint Joachim was 66. Saint Joachim, well, according to tradition, Saint Anne was born in Bethlehem and married to Saint Joachim of Nazareth. At the temple, Joachim's sacrifice was rejected, and the couple's childlessness was interpreted as a sign of divine displeasure. Joachim consequently withdrew to the desert, where he fasted and did penance for 40 days. Now, 40 days is the quarantine, and that comes up in the story again and again. Angels then appeared to both Joachim and Anne to promise them a child. Joachim later returned to Jerusalem and embraced Anne at the city gate, located in the walls of Jerusalem. An ancient belief held that a child born of an elderly mother who had given up hope of having offspring was destined for great things. Parallels occur in the Old Testament in the case of Hannah and the mother of Samuel, and in the New Testament in the case of the parents of St. John the Baptist. The name Saint Joachim very much looks like Jacob and Boaz. Saint Joachim, I believe, either represents the sun or the eternal male principle, and Saint Anne represents Boaz, the eternal female, or the moon. According to the Bible, Boaz and Joachim were the two copper, brass, or bronze pillars which stood on the porch of Solomon's temple, the first temple in Jerusalem. The original measurement, as taken from the Torah, was in cubits, which records how the pillars were 18 cubits high and 12 cubits around and hollow, 4 fingers thick. They are decorated with rows of 200 pomegranates, wreathed with 7 chains for each chapter, and topped with lilies. Sometimes Boaz is portrayed as the Mother Earth, and Jacob is the Father Sky, the ecliptic of astrology, the 12 signs. The 2 capitals decorated with chains and hundreds of pomegranates represent King David and King Solomon. The chains indicate royalty. The pomegranates represent the seed or sperm of the 2 kings who were responsible for building the temple of God in Israel, David and Solomon. 2 bronze columns beneath each capital represent 2 independent lines of their descent. These are the genealogies of Joseph and Mary, given in Matthew and Luke. The pomegranate was said to have 600 seeds. It's alchemy. It's the great work. And this is represented in the High Priestess card of the Tarot. And here the High Priestess is holding the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Behind her is a veil of pomegranates. So the young virgin is representing the High Priestess, born of Jacob and Boaz. Both standing on the moon. They're the same principle. Now, in the 15th century, the iconography for the Immaculate Conception began to settle on a heavenly realm, captured moments after her creation, when the spirit of Mary, as a young woman, looks up in awe at God or bows her head, the moon under her feet, and a halo of 12 stars around her head, a reference to the woman of the Revelation. A woman clothed with the sun. Additional imagery may include clouds, golden light, putti, lilies, and roses. This is Rubens' Immaculate Conception. And here we have Zurbarán, Immaculate Conception. This is Carlo Maratta, 1689, with the crown of stars. Here we have another Zurbarán. I could be a little mixed up here, but anyway, here's some iconography from Brazil, standing on the lunar orb with a serpent and a proper crown. And this is Ptolemy, Immaculate Conception from 1925. Let's see. This is Our Lady of Europe, a title given to the Blessed Virgin Mary as patroness of Gibraltar and protectress of Europe. The entire European continent was consecrated under the protection of Our Lady of Europe in the early 14th century from the shrine in Gibraltar in the British territory. The shrine of Our Lady of Europe is a Roman Catholic shrine at Campodolcino in Italy. It's currently headquarters of the European Ecumenical Center for Peace, a statue in the region of the Italian Alps which marks the hydrological center of Europe, since its watershed separating the basins of the rivers Rhine, Danube, and Po. It's 43 feet high, 660 feet above sea level, and 8,800 pounds. It's made of bronze gilt, which is an alchemical blend of tin and copper, Jupiter and Venus. This is Stella Maris, the miraculous statue of Our Lady, Star of the Sea, in the Basilica of Our Lady in Maastricht, the most important Marian shrine of the Netherlands. The European Union was formally established when the Maastricht Treaty came into force on November 1st, 1993. The Star of the Sea is the patroness of the Netherlands. The Roman Catholic Church honors Our Lady, Star of the Sea, with a feast day assigned September 27th. And the EU has 27 members. Science even gets in on the act by calling the basaltic plains of the earth moon Luna Mare. Maria is Latin for seas. This is the crown of immortality held by the allegorical figure Eterna on the Swedish House of Knights, fresco by David Ehrenstrahl. In Baroque allegorical art, this sometimes depicts the crown of immortality. This is Maria Moon of alchemy. Now the word corona is a crown, from the Latin corona, a crown, a garland. In ancient Rome, a crown or garland bestowed for distinguished military service. To turn, to bend. A coronavirus is so called for the spikes that protrude from its members and resembles the tines of a crown or the corona of the sun. The two constellations Corona Borealis, according to fable, the crown of Ariadne, and the Corona Australis, both are Ptolemaic, which means they both belong to the original 46. Is it 46? Constellations of Ptolemy. A luminous circle observed around the sun during the total eclipse, the corona. Here is the corona during an eclipse. And this is also an alchemical symbol of the blending of the sun and the moon, the male and the female principles, which I believe the tranny agenda has hijacked this information and taken it very literally, which in my opinion is against nature. Here's the corona sketched by Joaquin de Ferrer, and he is the one that coined the term corona. Here's the famed coronavirus. That we see all over the news today. Here's the viruses like the novel coronavirus are shells holding genetic material. It's pure fantasy. It's pure CGI. People have pointed out that the sun, the tarot card, the sun, is also number 19. I think we're experiencing the reversed form of this card at the moment. Excessive enthusiasm for the hoax, sadness, pessimism, unrealistic expectations, most of all, oppression. We're all being oppressed by this reversed sign. Here's the corona borealis, the crown of Ariadne. Here's the crown of Ariadne next to Hercules. This is from Urania's Mirror of 1825. Here's Bacchus and Ariadne. Bacchus bestowing the crown after he marries her on the island of Naxos. Some ancient writers call the corona the crown of Theseus, alluding to a crown given to the Greek hero by Amphitrite as indication that Theseus was a son of Poseidon. The jewels of the crown were of such luster that the crown allowed Theseus to navigate through the darkness of the labyrinth as he sought out the Minotaur. Theseus would subsequently give the crown to Ariadne as a thank you for her assistance, after which it was placed amongst the stars. Here's Bacchus and Ariadne by Titian. Dionysus discovers Ariadne on the shore of Naxos. And here is the crown of Ariadne in the sky, the corona. Alternately, Corona Borealis is the crown of Ariadne given to the daughter of King Minos by the gods when Ariadne married the god Dionysus, and thus Dionysus placed the crown amongst the stars. Here we have Venus bestowing the crown on Ariadne by Turchi. Ariadne gives Theseus the clue, the CLEW, the ball of thread, so that he can find his way out of the labyrinth under the umbrella. Ariadne was immortalized in the halls of Gnosis and Freemasonry for helping her lover, Theseus, who was the mythical founder king of Athens, to conquer the Minotaur and deliver him out of the labyrinth by means of a thread, or clue. For doing so, she was also known as the mistress of the labyrinth, as noted on the Linear B inscription from Knossos. To all the gods, honey. To the mistress of the labyrinth, honey. And this is supposed to be excavated from ancient Knossos, but this is just more Disney prop. Disney history. And to give credit, I got a lot of this information about Ariadne from the Gnostic Warrior. The myth of Ariadne has many variations. Ariadne was the daughter of Minos, the king of Crete, at Knossos, and the son of Zeus. And she is the daughter of Pasiphae, Minos' queen, and the daughter of Helios. Pasiphae had bestially slept with the white bull of Poseidon, giving birth to the Minotaur. Minos had attacked Athens after his son was killed there. The Athenians asked for terms and were required to sacrifice 7 young men and 7 maidens to the Minotaur every 7 years. One year the sacrificed party included Theseus, the son of King Aegeus, who volunteered to kill the Minotaur. Ariadne fell in love with him at first sight and provided him a sword and a ball of thread, the clue, so that he could retrace his way out of the labyrinth of the Minotaur. Ariadne betrayed her father and her country for her lover Theseus. She eloped with Theseus after he killed the Minotaur. Theseus abandoned Ariadne on Naxos with the help of Hypnos, who lulls her to sleep with the water of Lethe. She is discovered by Dionysus, who falls in love with her and marries her, giving her the crown of Gnosis. Here is a amphora called Ariadne Abandoned by Theseus, featuring the winged Hypnos, causing Ariadne to sleep. Hypnos and Thanatos, Sleep, and his half-brother Death by John William Waterhouse. Hypnos is the son of Nyx, the night, and Erebus, the darkness. His brother is Thanatos, who is death. Both siblings live in the underworld, Hades, or in Erebus, another valley of the Greek underworld. According to rumors, Hypnos lived in a big cave, which the river Lethe, forgetfulness, comes from, and where night and day meet. His bed is made of ebony. On the entrance of the cave grow a number of poppies and other hypnotic plants. So he is the god of narcotics. No light and no sound would ever enter his grotto. According to Homer, he lives on the island of Lemnos, which later on has been claimed to be his very own dream island. Here is Lemnos, also known as Dia or Naxos or Kos or Patmos. They're all the same island off Crete, 7 nautical miles north of the Heraklion, which is the capital of Crete, home of the palace of Knossos and the labyrinth. This is supposedly the palace of Knossos on Crete. Just more Disney history for you. Obviously, I don't believe this Mycenaean civilization ever existed. It's just myth. Now, what's interesting is Hypnos is a short story by the American horror fiction writer H.P. Lovecraft, penned in March of 1922. In this short story, the constellation Corona Borealis features as the main plot ingredient. Hypnos is a first-person narrative written from the perspective of a sculptor living in London, England. The narrator writes that he fears sleep and is resolved to write his story down lest it drive him further mad. The narrator recounts meeting a mysterious man in a railway station who had just passed out. The moment the man opened his immense, sunken, and widely luminous eyes, the narrator knew that the stranger would become his friend. In the eyes of the stranger, he witnessed important knowledge of the mysteries he always sought to learn. From this point on, he would touch his friend and sculpt him daily. At night, they would commence their adventures, exploring worlds beyond human comprehension. So here they are, in their dream world, Over time, the narrator's companion begins to speak of using their ability to transcend into the unknown as a way to rule the universe via a set of drugs. Passing through several barriers, eventually the narrator comes to one he cannot cross, though his friend does. He awakens severely shaken and reticent, warning only that they must avoid sleep at all cost. Here's another cover of Hypnos, and notice the bat. And here's a poor bat being swab raped for the coronavirus, for which it is blamed. Here's an illustration from the short story with the dreaded corona borealis shining its light on his friend. I'll read a short excerpt. The tension of my vigil became oppressive, and a wild train of trivial impressions and associations thronged through my almost unhinged mind. I heard a clock strike somewhere, not ours, for that was not a striking clock, and my morbid fancy found in this new starting point for idle wanderings. Clocks, time, space, infinity. And then my fancy reverted to the local as I reflected that even now, beyond the roof and the fog and the rain and the atmosphere, corona borealis was rising in the northeast. Corona borealis, which my friend had appeared to dread, and whose scintillant semicircle of stars must even now be glowing unseen through the measureless abysses of ether. All at once my feverishly sensitive ears seemed to detect a new and wholly distinct component in the soft medley of drug-magnified sounds, a low and damnably insistent whine from very far away, droning, clamoring, mocking, calling from the northeast. From then on, with the aid of drugs, the two avoid sleep. As each time they succumb, they both seem to rapidly age and are plagued by nightmares that the narrator refuses to explain. The story ends with the narrator explaining that one night his friend fell into a deep breathing sleep and was impossible to arouse. The narrator shrieks, faints, and awakens surrounded by police and neighbors who inform him that his friend is not real. There is only a statue of his friend in this room engraved with the word Hypnos. This turns out to be the sculptor's greatest work. Here's an illustration of the aging sculptor with his friend Hypnos in his head. It's a modern portrayal of Hypnos, the elder outer god of the H.P. Lovecraft mythos, with his crown of 12 poppies. Corona Borealis lies between the constellations Bootes and Hercules and represents the crown of Ariadne, daughter of King Minos of Greek mythology, who helped the hero Theseus kill the Minotaur and find his way out of the labyrinth in which the creature lived. In Celtic mythology, Corona Borealis is known as the Caer Arianrhod, or the Castle of Arianrhod. Forgive my Gaelic. The place where the mythical lady Arianrhod lived. This is Welsh for the constellation Corona Borealis. She is of the silver wheel, the Celtic moon mother goddess. And this is the 8-spoked wheel of the cross-quarter holidays of the year. I looked up the crown of Ariadne on YouTube, and this came up. It's a video by Raymond Murray Schaefer, a harpist, who is playing the crown of Ariadne, and this is the thumbnail. I couldn't find any more information about it, but it is quite interesting. And here we have 7 crows, perhaps referencing the 7 stars of the Corona Borealis. And we get to, of course, the corvids, a group of crows or corvids are called a murder. This brings up COVID-19. Sounds very much like corvid. Corvus, the crow, is a constellation described by Ptolemy. Apollo was in love with a mortal woman named Coronis, but having fallen pregnant by the god, Coronis consorted with the mortal prince Ischys. Apollo would kill his lover, but place her among the stars, for Coronis' name means crow. So we have another synchronicity. Coronis means crow. Corvus is the crow, another constellation. This is Apollo and Coronis by Alzheimer. As the flames consumed the funeral pyre of Coronis, Apollo, or Hermes, was said to have rescued his yet unborn child, giving it life as his mother lay dead. This newborn baby would be given the name Asclepius, meaning to cut open, and was given over to the care of Chiron, the wise centaur. This is a depiction of Apollo with the corvid who brought news of Coronis' infidelity. Apollo sent a white raven, in some versions, to spy on his lover Coronis. When the raven brought back the news that Coronis had been unfaithful to him, Apollo scorched the raven in his fury, turning the animal's feathers black. That's why all ravens are black today. All these crows in relation to the pandemic remind me of the plague doctor and the donning of the first hazmat suit. The protective suit consisted of a light waxed fabric overcoat, a mask with glass eyes openings, and a beak-shaped nose typically stuffed with herbs, straw, and spices. Plague doctors would also commonly carry a cane to examine and direct patients without the need to make direct contact with the patient. Early social distancing. Physicians had subscribed to the miasma theory, which was the idea that contagion spread through the foul-smelling air. Now we believe in germs and viruses and other such cooties. The design of these clothes has been attributed to Charles Delorme, the chief physician to Louis XIII. He said, "The nose is 1/2 foot long, shaped like a beak, filled with perfume. Under the coat we wear boots made of Moroccan leather, goat leather, and a short-sleeved blouse in smooth skin. The hat and gloves are also made of the same skin with spectacles over the eyes." Here is the plague doctor. The cane was also used on patients who believed the plague to be a punishment sent from God and requested the plague doctor to whip them in repentance. And aren't we all doing repentance in this quarantine for our ecological sins? So earlier I said Apollo and Coronis, the crow, had a son. That son was Asclepius. This is the rod of Asclepius. Asclepius is the child of Coronis, the crow. Here's Asclepius's rod and serpent. He is the Greek-Egyptian son and disciple of Hermes Trismegistus. In the Corpus Hermeticum, the Egyptian-Greek wisdom texts from the 2nd century or earlier, are presented the dialogues in which the teacher enlightens a disciple. The texts form the basis of Hermeticism. They discuss the divine, the cosmos, the mind, and nature, and some touch upon alchemy and astrology and related concepts. Hermes' disciples are Tat, Ammon, and Asclepius. part of the syncretic cultural movement that also included the Neoplatonic philosophy of the Greco-Roman mysteries and late Orphic and Pythagorean literature, and influenced Gnostic forms of the Abrahamic religions. One of the texts, the Asclepius, lost in Greek but partially preserved in Latin, contains a bloody prophecy at the end of Roman rule of Egypt and the resurgence of the pagan Egyptian power. Also, the magic of animating statues figured prominently. A particular type of non-venomous snake was often used in healing rituals, and these snakes, the Asclepian snakes, crawled around freely on the floor in dormitories where the sick and injured slept. Ritual purification would be followed by offerings or sacrifices to the gods according to means, and the supplicant would then spend the night in the holiest part of the sanctuary, the abaton. Any dreams or visions would be reported to a priest who would prescribe the appropriate therapy by a process of interpretation. This is the temple of Asclepius at Epidaurus. The serpent as a symbol that unites and expresses the dual nature of the work of the physician, who deals with life and death, sickness and health, the ambiguity of the serpent as a symbol, and the contradictions it is thought to reflect the ambiguity of the use of drugs, which can help or harm, as reflected in the meaning of the term pharmakon, which meant drug, medicine, and poison in the ancient Greek. They often prescribed snake venom. This is the Asclepian snake winding around the bowl of Hygeia. Hygeia was Asclepius's either daughter or consort. So you have the staff and the chalice. The bowl of Hygeia represents the pharmacy in Europe. This is Hippocrates. The original Hippocratic oath was dedicated to Asclepius and Hygeia. Quote, I swear by Apollo, physician, by Asclepius, by Hygeia, and by all the gods and goddesses making them my witness, that I will carry out according to my ability and judgment this oath and this indenture. The ethic of nil nocere, do no harm. In 2019, the Hippocratic Oath was changed again following increasing pressure from the planetary health physicians to require protection of the environment which sustains us. Margaret Chan from the WHO stated in 2008, in the face of this challenge, WHO is committed to do everything it can to ensure all is done to protect human health from climate change. So, according to the Greek poet Hesiod, Theseus abandoned Ariadne, sleeping on the sacred healing island of Naxos, 7 miles off Crete. It has also been known by the names Kos, or Kus, Zia, Sia, Sea, Seos, Ko, Kuos, Kus, Delos, Merope, Lemnos, Letos, Stanchio, and Patmos. They're all referring to the same area. The syncretic nature of our myths. Today, the island of Kos is simply known as Dia. It's a barren wasteland that was once fertile home to the medical priesthood of the Kohanim, the Kohens, and one of the world's best schools of medicine. A person from Kos is called a Kohen. The word is also an adjective, as in Kohen goods. This is the Kohen priesthood. Patmos is a small Greek island in the Aegean Sea. It is the location of the vision given to the disciple John in the book of Revelation in the New Testament, and where the book was written. It is one of the northernmost islands in the Dodecanese complex. The name Dodecanese means the 12 islands. St. John the Evangelist on Patmos. In Greek mythology, King Minos dwelt in a palace at Knossos. He had Daedalus construct a labyrinth, a very large maze, by some connected with the double-bladed axe or labrys, in which to retain his son the Minotaur. Daedalus also built a dancing floor for Queen Ariadne. They could have been one and the same. The name Knossos was subsequently adopted by Arthur Evans. I've heard that the situation we're in right now with the coronavirus has been compared to the Game of Thrones, and here is the labyrinth from the Game of Thrones. Of course, the protagonist, Katniss, lives in District 12. Today, the island of Kos is simply known as Dia, the barren wasteland, home to the medical priesthood of the Kohanim. This is the modern-day Kohanim. Here, a Kohen holds a silver mizrak, which is used to collect the blood from the sacrifice. After collecting the blood, the priest then spills it onto the corner of the altar. The Kohanim priesthood is one of the oldest still alive today. They are the ancient priests who had worshipped the god Asclepius, the god of wisdom, medicine, healing, rejuvenation, and physicians, with his serpent-entwined Tau staff. The staff, the spine, or the phallus, symbol of itinerant physicians, 26 leaves. The status of the priest Cohen was conferred on Aaron, the brother of Moses, and his sons, as an everlasting covenant, or a covenant of salt. During the 40 years of wandering, again the 40, the Quaresima, in the wilderness and until the Holy Temple was built in Jerusalem, the priests performed their priestly service in the portable tabernacle. In the book of Numbers, God's covenant with the Aaronic priesthood is said to be a covenant of salt. Salt is the tetramorph: Scorpio, Aquarius, Leo, Taurus. The bronze serpent on a pole, first described in the book of Numbers, which God told Moses to erect so that the Israelites who saw it would be protected from the dying from the bites of the fiery serpents, which God had sent to punish them for speaking against him and Moses. The dual nature of the serpent, harmful or healing, is represented here. The bronze being a blend of tin and copper, Jupiter and Venus. It's alchemical. You must raise the serpent. In a broader sense, since Aaron was descended of the tribe of Levi, priests are sometimes included in the term Levites by direct patrilineal descent. Cohen, or Kohen, means priest, which is simply the Hebrew word for priest. Hence, your last name does not have to be Cohen to be a member of this biblical family. The people and families of the original Cohens were simply from the island of Kos, located 7 miles offshore of Crete, and that were specially trained in medicine. This is why the family of the Kohen were consecrated to serve in the sanctuary of the temple as the high priests of ancient Israel, up to the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE. We also find that the Apostle Paul had visited the island of Kos, as described in Acts 21. And it came to pass that after we were gotten from them and had launched, we came with a straight course unto Kos, and the day following unto Rhodes, and from thence unto Patara. This is the hand sign of the Kohanim. The island of Kos is where the father of medicine, Hippocrates, was born, and also where he had operated his world-famous school of medicine. Hippocrates learned medicine by writing down the successful cures that had been recorded by patients on the walls of the Asclepius Kohen temple. It was the same island where the god Dionysus had found and wedded Ariadne, where Hypnos dwelt and called it his dream island, and where John the Revelator penned the Apocalypse. Back to Ariadne. For rescuing Theseus from the labyrinth, Ariadne was given the crown that was called Gnosia Corona, and she was surnamed Gnosis, from the city of that name in Crete. The Vatican sleeping Ariadne is, of course, a replica, the one created by the Cretan mason Daedalus, one of the first known Freemasons in history, the builder of Crete, or creation. The statue signifies the state of consciousness when we lose our gnosis or come under the influence of black magic, a form of hypnosis. There's hypnos again. We are under hypnos, which is a state of consciousness in which a person apparently loses the power of voluntary action and is highly responsive to suggestion or direction. I would say that we are all under hypnosis during this coronavirus pandemic and highly responsive to suggestion. We must wake up from this hypnosis and claim our crown of gnosis. Below her, in what appears to be hell or purgatory, are the priests of the serpent, the Gnostic Ophites, the sons of the serpent. Blavatsky had written in Isis Unveiled that Apollo and Python, Osiris and Typhon, Christos and the serpent are all convertible terms, and the followers of this cult that were called masters of wisdom, and all initiates into the sacred mysteries are called nagas, or serpents of wisdom. The Gnostic goddess Ariadne was the daughter of, we've already been over that. The name Ariadne means most holy, composed of the Cretan Greek elements of Ari, most, and Adonos, holy, meaning noble. After all, she was born of the gods, and her name may also signify the DNA of the Aryan race. Ariadne. Her name can be found all over the world, such as in India by the names Arya, the noble. Ariadne's crown is the crown of gnosis. The death of Ariadne, consistently caused by the goddess Artemis in the many myths that survive into the first millennium BC, define her as a cult hero. We read in the Iliad that Ariadne is imagined here dancing within the labyrinthine space made for her by the master craftsman Daedalus, the first mason. Her priestesses, bare-breasted, practiced ritual snake handling, ecstatic dancing, prophetic trance. Priestess queens ruled Crete, the last culture in recorded history to support equality. I don't believe this ancient culture ever existed. Ariadne, the high fruitful one, brings rebirth. This lunar fertility goddess was known for her athletic prowess. Serpents, symbols of rebirth, were ritually handled by her priestesses. And here is Sir Arthur Evans, who brought you the hoax of Knossos, telling you what he thinks of you. This is what I call archaeological theater. Here's Sir Arthur Evans restoring the grand staircase at Knossos. creating the vision of Knossos. Indeed. One last sumptuous depiction of Ariadne by Jean-Baptiste Greuze. Quite voluptuous. Quarantine. We're all under involuntary quarantine at the moment. It's a period a ship suspected of carrying disease is kept in isolation. A space of 40 days. 40, from the Latin quadraginta, 40. So called from the Venetian policy, first enforced, of keeping ships from plague-stricken countries in port for 40 days. Any period of forced isolation. In English, the word meant a period of 40 days in which a widow has the right to remain in her dead husband's house. And quarantine, from the 15th century, the desert in which Christ fasted for 40 days. The Quaresima. March 22nd of this year was the 40th anniversary of the Georgia Guidestones. And I hate bringing in the Georgia Guidestones because it reminds me of just some prefabricated conspiracy pablum. Yet the 40 years is another Quaresima. What I did find interesting, that the orientation of the 4 outer stones is aligned to astronomical measures. They denote the lunar declination cycle, or the lunastices, as opposed to the solstices, which occur every 18.6 years. The center column has an angular hole through which you can see the North Star. A slot is carved through the center pillar, and it aligns perfectly with the sun's equinoxes and solstices. Every day at noon, the sun's rays pass through a 22 millimeter aperture, which is placed in the capstone. When the light shines on the center stone, it indicates the day of the year. This structure is another alchemical marriage of the sun and moon. Declination is the celestial coordinate, similar to our latitude on the earth. It's an angle on the celestial equator. The lunar declination, the lunastices, or a lunar standstill, is the gradually varying range between the northern and southern limits of the moon's declination. The 40 days is also symbolic of the time between the cross-quarter days and the solstice and equinoxes. It's actually 45 days in between, but symbolically we use the 40 days. The most important 40 days is that of Lent. And it's significant that this lockdown has fallen within the period of Lent, under the Italian name Quaresima, from the Latin quadragesima, marking 40 days of penance that begins on Ash Wednesday and climaxes on Easter Sunday. Lent 2020. Here's another corona. And I find it interesting that we are supposed to be doing penance because we're giving reports of nature rejuvenating without our participation, showing that we are the climate change villains, and we need to do penance for our sins in quarantine. Let's see. Latin, or Lent, is a solemn religious observance in the Christian liturgical calendar that begins on Ash Wednesday and ends approximately 6 weeks later, before Easter Sunday. The purpose of Lent is the preparation of the believer for Easter through prayer, doing penance, mortifying the flesh, repentance of sins, almsgiving, and self-denial. Lent is traditionally described as lasting for 40 days in commemoration of the 40 days Jesus spent fasting in the desert. According to the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, before beginning his public ministry, during which he endured the temptation of Satan. Lent comes from lengthening. The sun's rays are lengthening as it passes over from Pisces to Aries, crossing the ecliptic. It's passing over. Here the sun is rising from Pisces, going over the horizon into the dawn of Aries. This is the 24-hour clock. High noon, sunset, midnight, dawn. The word tropic, as in Tropic of Capricorn or Tropic of Cancer, comes from the ancient Greek word meaning to turn, referring to how ascending or descending motion turns to descending or ascending motion at the solstices. So here we have the Tropic of Cancer. The sun is ascending and then it descends until it reaches the Tropic of Capricorn, and it turns at the solstice and begins its climb again. Tropicus, of or pertaining to a turn or change, a trope. Lent 2020 began on February 26th and it will end on April 9th. The next day will be Good Friday, April 10th. Sunday will be Easter, April 12th. The exact date of Easter changes each year, but there's a definite period in which the days occur, and that's between March 22nd through April 25th. Easter always occurs on the first Sunday after the Paschal full moon. So what's the Paschal full moon? It is the first full moon that occurs after the vernal equinox, which signifies the beginning of spring in the northern hemisphere. The Quaresima, the 40 days, was about waiting for the time when the days would be longer than the nights, the vernal equinox, the path of the sun along the ecliptic. Today's corona quarantine is a satanic ritual on us all, where we're forced to repent. And while you're repenting of your ecological sins, don't forget to invoke these saints for their protection against pandemics. This is Saint Roch. He was a 14th century Catholic saint, a confessor whose death is commemorated on August 16th and 9th. He is the patron saint invoked against plague. Saint Roch, in the 13th century, embarked on a pilgrimage to Rome when he was 20, begging all the way. When he arrived in Italy, he discovered a country ravaged by the plague. He eventually contracted the disease and retreated to the woods. He was saved by a dog who brought him food and licked his wounds to health. Edmund the Martyr is another patron saint of pandemics. He was the king of East Anglia from about 855 to his death. The Danes murdered him when they conquered his army in 869. Edmund the Martyr, in addition to being a patron saint invoked against pandemics, is also the patron of torture victims and protection from the plague. Saint Anthony the Great is invoked as a patron against infectious diseases. Here Saint Anthony visits the hermit Saint Paul. And while they were thus talking, a crow came flying and brought them 2 loaves of bread. And when the crow was gone, Saint Paul said, "Be thou glad and joyful, for our Lord is debonair and merciful. He hath sent us bread for to eat. It is 40 years past that every day he hath sent me half a loaf. But now at thy coming he hath sent 2 whole loaves and double provender." This is from the Golden Legend, or the Lives of the Saints, by Voragine, the Archbishop of Genoa. And finally we have Saint Corona. In the earliest version of Saint Corona's story, written by a 4th century deacon in Antioch. Saint Corona publicly confessed her faith and comforted Saint Victor, a Roman soldier, as he was being tortured and killed for his Christian faith. Afterwards, she too was martyred. She was tied between 2 palm trees that had been bent to the ground and torn apart when the trees were allowed to snap back to full height. Saint Corona. Saint Corona is especially venerated in Austria and Bavaria as the patron saint against epidemics. Here's Victor being tortured. She encourages him in his faith. Here is the image of Saint Corona high above the altar on the Way of the Cross, which was both restored following the renovation in 2019 in the Saint Corona Church in Austria. She is invoked in connection with superstitions involving money, such as gambling and treasure hunting. So, apparently she's also the patron saint of treasure hunters. But if Corona wasn't the patron saint of pandemics before, she certainly is now. The patron saint of treasure hunters may also be apropos of the situation. We need to awaken from our hypnosis of abject fear and seek the treasures afforded to us in these extraordinary times. I wish you all health. Thank you for watching.